Hey y'all, Andreatic here again. Lately, I've been meaning to make a guide, so I asked all of you which type of guide you'd like to see the most, and a guide on positioning was voted for most by quite a bit. I was originally going to make this guide as a positioning tips on defense specifically for every map, but instead I've decided I would just do a full guide on positioning for Mercy rather than just specifying it to defense or offense. I'll start out by talking about the general concepts and ideas around positioning, what's good and what's not, how you should be using Guardian Angel to position, how you should position with and against certain heroes, and finally I'll go over each map type and give examples and advice for those. So with all that out of the way, let's get right into it. Positioning on Mercy is a fairly simple concept, but in the heat of the moment it may seem more difficult to make decisions and actually position properly. To start off, I want to explain that Mercy is a hero that absolutely should be played around hardcover or line of sight. Mercy really shouldn't be seen at all by the enemy if you can help it, and since she's a pocket type support, you're usually able to very easily do your job from these types of positions. When positioning as Mercy, you want to think about what the enemy sees. Ideally, all they should be able to see is whoever you're damage boosting and your beam that is attached to them, but they shouldn't really be able to see you. That's because if you're positioning properly, you'll either be around hardcover or just completely out of their line of sight. Positioning while in Valkyrie is the same concept. A lot of people have a habit of using Valkyrie to get all the way to the top of the skybox, and although this is great versus certain heroes, especially short-range ones such as Winston and Reaper, most maps don't have cover in these areas, and most of the time it's better to play around walls and abuse the fact that your beam length is doubled. This way you can play even farther back. The vertical height that you choose to play at doesn't really matter, but you'll notice that most high-rated Mercy players play closer to the ground or closer to cover rather than the skybox. This type of positioning works great versus hit scans since they need direct line of sight in order to hit you. Versus dive heroes though, this does also work, but you need to think a little bit further and play in areas that they won't want to go to. If possible, make it dangerous for them to come to you by playing farther back behind multiple teammates or in a difficult to reach spot so that by the time they get to you, they've had to use their movement abilities. A lot of times, you may need to use Guardian Angel to force them to use their movement abilities and then dash to a safer position. Using map geometry to line of sight them can also be really useful. The same concept applies to heroes like Pharah or Echo who play in the open. Speaking of Guardian Angel, I would like to talk about it here for a little bit since it is an extremely important part of positioning. Although Guardian Angel only has a cooldown of 1.5 seconds, this doesn't mean you need to be spamming it off cooldown or super jumping every time you use it. I know it's fun to get focused by a dive hero and just be constantly spamming Guardian Angel to avoid all the enemies and waste their time, but in reality, you shouldn't force those situations by playing in the open. You should only use Guardian Angel for its two main uses, and those are to reposition and get to an ally who's in need. Guardian Angel is an amazing repositioning ability. Since it has such a short cooldown, it's great at helping you get to better areas as the fight plays out. For example, maybe one spot is safe at the start of a fight, but as it progresses, it becomes risky to play in. So then it's probably a good idea to use Guardian Angel to position to this spot over here, since there's more cover and it's on high ground or something. Guardian Angel alone is great for repositioning, but the addition of Guardian Angel techs like Super Jump and even Sling Hop can be used to quickly take high ground around corners. So if you need any help learning any of the Guardian Angel techs, I have a full guide covering them all, which I will link in the description below. The other thing Guardian Angel is great at, and is mainly used for, is so you can get within beam range of your allies. All supports who can't heal for long range have some sort of mobility so that they can get to their allies to heal them, while long range supports don't have this. For example, Ana and Zen both heal from a pretty far range, and neither of them have movement abilities, but Mercy, Lucio, and Moira, for example, all have fairly good mobility and can only heal at close to medium range of their ally. This is an intentional hero design and is basically the game telling you to use these abilities to do your job. Now, just because you can use Guardian Angel to get within beam range of your allies does not mean you need to hug them. Mercy's beam has a range of 15 meters, so you should use this distance to play in areas that are as safe as possible. Also remember that Mercy's beam stays attached through walls for a little bit of time, but will stay attached as long as it's constantly having line of sight on its target every so often. So when playing around hardcover, you can jiggle peek to stay out of enemy line of sight and stay behind hardcover while still keeping your beam attached. So at this point in the video, the two big takeaways that you should take from this so far is that 1. Mercy should spend most of her time out of the enemy's line of sight and typically play around hardcover, and 2. Guardian Angel should mostly be used either to reposition or to get to an ally who needs help. So moving on, let's talk about playing with certain allies and how it's best to position when playing with them. When playing with snipers and hit scans such as Widow, Hanzo, Kree, or Ashe, Since they typically play on high ground most of the time, you can usually find some sort of hard cover to use while pocketing them. If there isn't much cover in the area you both are playing from, just try your best to distance yourself and play out of line of sight. While pocketing heroes such as Pharah or Echo, who fly around and have really good vertical mobility, you'll typically be in the air with them, which means most of the time there's not going to be a lot of cover. However, you don't always have to play right next to them, and if you're playing versus snipers or other hit scans, staying lower in the sky may open up more options for cover, or depending on the map, you can usually stay out of the enemy's line of sight by playing around certain roofs or corners. A good Echo or Pharah will usually play the same way and use line of sight to their advantage, so that will also help it make it easier for you. When diving with dive heroes such as Genji, Winston, or D.Va, you'll most likely need to use Guardian Angel often just so that you can keep up with them, which can seem a little stressful. You'll need to stay close within beam range of your target, but you'll also have to make sure you're playing around cover whenever possible. Playing this way is the safest you can play in an active fight. Pocketing these heroes is pretty difficult compared to hit scans and snipers, so you'll need to use map geometry as best as you can whenever you can, since it may not always be there. Now, moving on, I'm going to go through all the map types and give some general positioning tips for each. Let's start with 2CP. 2CP is great for Mercy since most maps have lots of cover and high ground to use. As Mercy, you'll never want to be on point if someone else is already on, only touch if you need to contest. In most situations, it's great to just play on high ground and do your job from there. In most situations, the enemy is going to focus whoever's on the point rather than taking the time to get to you. And if they do start shooting at you, or a dive hero comes for you, you can use Guardian Angel to reposition to a safer spot. On defensive 2CP, it's relatively easy to position since there's usually lots of hard cover and you'll almost always know where the enemies are coming from. On maps like Hanamura or Volskaya, I like to position in areas like this that are behind cover but have plenty of fly paths which you can use to reposition to. It's much safer than playing forward in these rooms since you won't get cornered if an enemy walks in your direction. When attacking 2CP, the same concepts apply, except you won't really need to touch the point at all since you won't need to contest and it's not your job as Mercy to cap the point. Maps like Hanamura and Anubis have high ground that overlooks the first point, so you can very easily do your job while staying safe. In addition to that, most of the areas you use on defense also work good on attack, so just use those. Moving on, King of the Hill maps can be relatively tricky depending on which map you're playing on. Similarly to 2CP, you don't want to be playing on the point if you can help it, but it depends on the map and it depends on whether you're defending or attacking the point, since teamfights usually happen on them. On a map like Nepal Shrine, for example, if you're attacking, it's quite easy to stay off the point and assist your team, whether you're with a DPS on the right side or left side of the point, where your whole team is pushing down the main choke. However, when defending the point, it's not uncommon for your team to just play directly on the point. In this scenario, you'll have to play the point, but it's best to play farther back and abuse your beam range. On maps like Ilios that are pretty open, hit scans and Pharah are pretty commonly played, so just keep in mind the hero-specific tips I gave earlier. On payload maps, there's usually a lot of high ground and a lot of cover you can use, however, there's also a lot of flanks and alternate paths the enemy can take. On these maps, it's important to play in areas that are hard to reach when possible, and always keep an eye out for the enemy and watch your flanks. The payload itself is a great form of cover, and you can even help push or stall it if you're using it that way. In addition to that, if you're attacking on a payload map, the payload heals you, so combining your passive regen and the payload's healing, you can quickly heal yourself in a tight situation. Finally, on to Hybrid, and there's really not a lot to say about this since we've already been over everything, since Hybrid is a combination of a 2CP map and a payload map. The same concepts will apply depending on which portion of the map you're on. Play first point similarly to a 2CP map, making sure you stay off the point unless you need to contest it on defense. Once you're on the payload portion of the map, most hybrid maps are laid out exactly the same as the normal payload map, so there's plenty of cover and high ground at your disposal, but just make sure you watch out for your flanks. And of course, as I said before, on attack, the payload will heal you. Alright, so that's pretty much everything I have. I tried to explain everything as best as I could. Positioning is kind of something that can be kind of difficult to grasp at first, and you kind of just need to get, experience and kind of just making stupid mistakes to figure out what you really need to do, but I tried to give general ideas and concepts of what you should do to get an idea. I know I'm still kind of getting used to the whole voice thing, and I say that every time I do one of these videos, but this is my first time reading off of a script and reading it word for word, so if I sound dead, that's probably why. Obviously I'm not reading off of one now, I'm just kind of talking, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it helps. If you want to see other guides from me, just let me know. Positioning guides on other supports too, I'd be open to do something like that. I play a lot of Ana, so if you want like Ana guides, I can definitely do something like that. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them, but I think that's everything from me. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. I'll see you next time.